she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
I'm Norman Solomon, and you're listening to my new podcast, The Blue Road to Trump Hell. This is all about digging deep into how the Democratic Party enabled Donald Trump to become president twice. And two central questions to explore are, how did the United States get into this terrible mess, and how do we get out of it? No factors were more pivotal than the outlooks and actions of the Democratic Party leadership. Scrutinizing them now is vital not just for clarity about the past, it's also about making possible a clear focus on ways that those kind of failures can be prevented in the future. First, let's do a quick year by year, beginning with what led up to the first election triumph of Donald Trump. 2016. Hillary Clinton offers more of the status quo. Her allies in the Democratic Party and corporate media pull out all the stops so she can win the party's presidential nomination. With a big assist from the Democratic National Committee, she prevails over the strong primary challenge from Bernie Sanders, but her campaign trail goes downhill from there. After rallying behind Sanders' genuine progressive populism, a lot of young people just don't trust the pseudo-populism of Clinton's campaign. She's earned a millennial problem, and it prevents her from becoming president. 2017. Democratic Party leaders can hardly blame themselves or their nominee for the virtually unbelievable circumstance of the Trump presidency. A critical focus on Clinton's coziness with Wall Street won't do. Neither will critiquing her thinly veiled contempt for the progressive wing of the party, but blaming Trump's victory on Russia becomes an obsessive theme. 2018. The Democratic leadership is mapping out a battle plan for the midterm elections in November. At the same time, a key priority is to thwart the inside threat posed by progressive forces. Establishment Democrats are keeping a watchful eye and political guns trained on Bernie Sanders. 2019. Democrats take control of the House, and a large cast of political characters is often running for the party's presidential nomination. Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren are at the left edge, while more than a dozen others jostle for media attention. With corporate elites determined to retain undemocratic power, seeing either Sanders or Warren in the Oval Office would be the worst possible outcome. 2020. Early in the year, the economic populism of the Bernie Sanders campaign continues to catch fire, while many forces team up to function as fire extinguishers. The Democratic Party establishment acts to smother the grassroots blaze. After Joe Biden's fifth-place finish in the New Hampshire primary puts his campaign on life support, rescue comes 18 days later from South Carolina, where Biden wins a landslide primary victory. And then several contenders quickly drop out of the race and effusively endorse him. When Biden clinches the nomination, progressives largely close ranks behind him to defeat Trump. Biden squeaks through. 2021. President Biden's first year includes backing and signing legislation with real benefits for tens of millions of Americans, but his resolve dissipates. Before the end of the year, he abandons Build Back Better legislation that would have been transformational. Notably, Biden does withdraw all U.S. troops from Afghanistan in late summer, but overall he opts to fuel militarism with ever higher Pentagon spending instead of devoting adequate resources to meet human needs and protect the natural environment. The president goes full speed ahead with, quote, modernization plans for nuclear weapons that already have a pre-overrun price tag of 1.7 trillion. 2022. Biden relapses into his customary moderate political mode while his capacity to speak coherently weakens. Party discipline, internalized by Democrats in Congress, precludes independent-minded leadership as they begin to proclaim that Biden should run for re-election. Conformity of groupthink and fear of retribution from the Biden White House keep people quiet. 2023. A real-life Shakespearean tragedy unfolds as Biden throws down a gauntlet to run for re-election even while his mental frailty becomes more evident. Enablers ignore the party base, with polls continuing to show that most Democrats don't want him to be the next nominee. That includes 94% of Democrats under the age of 30. It's a common canard pushed by Biden's coterie of sycophants, contending that because he defeated Trump once, he's the best president to do it again. It's a claim that ignores the fact that Trump 2020 represented an unpopular status quo, and Biden 2024 would represent an even more unpopular status quo, as the right track, wrong track polling makes crystal clear. Soon after Hamas attacks Israel on October 7th and the Israeli military starts its siege of Gaza, Biden begins to further alienate many of his party's usual voters by massively boosting U.S. military aid as the slaughter of Palestinian civilians escalates. 2024. Among top Democrats, denial about Biden's evident cognitive infirmity grows, along with the infirmity itself. Even after Biden's disastrous debate performance in late June, the political reflex of lying and dissembling prevents him from bowing out for another 28 days. That leaves just 107 days for the newly installed nominee, Kamala Harris, to pick up the pieces before Election Day. At first, it seems she might find ways to depart from coming across as Biden's yes woman, but there's no such departure. Nothing epitomizes the Harris campaign's moral collapse more than her insistence on echoing the Biden line about Gaza while the U.S. continues to arm Israel's military as it methodically kills Palestinian civilians. In the process, Harris chooses to ignore both human decency and polls, showing that far more voters would be likely to cast their ballots for her if she would come out against sending further arms to Israel. Electoral disaster ensues. More recently, in November 2025, two events showed the huge gap between the potential for true progressive change of the Democratic Party's leadership. When Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani won the election as mayor of New York, he said,
"And if there is any way to terrify a despot, it is by dismantling the very conditions that allowed him to accumulate power."
A week later, 8 members of the Senate's Democratic caucus surrendered to Trump, betraying efforts to defend Obamacare and a healthcare status quo that still leaves tens of millions uninsured or underinsured. The capitulation meant that the nation's healthcare crisis would get even worse. Lackluster and conformist Democratic Party leadership, coloring inside corporate lines and enmeshed with rich backers, hardly offers a plausible way to defeat the Trump forces, much less advance a humane political agenda. Saving the country from further descent into autocracy requires recognizing and overcoming the chokehold that Democratic Party leaders have on the party. That chokehold didn't happen by accident. For decades, a repetition compulsion by top Democrats has led the party and, in effect, the country down a garden path with terrible results, laying groundwork for the rise of pseudo-populism that twice propelled Donald Trump into the White House. Let's look at what happened with economic inequality under the 21st century's first Democratic president. Elites did quite well after Barack Obama took back the presidency for Democrats in January 2009 amid the Great Recession. He bailed out big banks while a huge number of people lost their homes. By the time Obama was most of the way through his presidency, he'd facilitated the dispossession of at least 5.2 million U.S. homeowner families, the explosion of inequality, and the largest ruination of middle-class wealth in nearly a century, as journalist David Dayen pointed out. Today, the Democratic Party seems mostly stuck in the mud of the past, as if mired in the Joe Biden era of pinning election hopes on revulsion toward Donald Trump. Yes, of course, the cascading horrors of Trump 2.0 call for fierce opposition, but just denouncing a regime's bottomless pit of evils is not a good bet for ending GOP control of Congress in 2026 or the presidency in 2028. President Biden's unspeakable, tragic refusal to forego running for re-election until far too late was enabled by time-worn party dynamics and follow-the-leader patterns that remain all too real. As this decade enters its second half, progressives face the paradoxical challenge of helping to build a united front that includes anti-Trump corporatists and militarists, even while fighting against corporatism and militarism. The need involves what we could call a dialectical approach, recognizing the twin imperatives of defeating a viciously fascistic Republican Party while working to gain enough power to implement truly humane agendas that will inspire voters. If widespread and sustained, grassroots activism could force the Democratic Party leadership to stop blocking policy proposals that offer major uplift to huge numbers of Americans in economic and social distress. Potential remedies are clear: enhanced Medicare for all, free child care, free public college, tax relief for the large majority in sync with big tax increases for the wealthy and large corporations. Federal programs ensuring good jobs, including a Green New Deal. Requirements that large companies receiving government support can't engage in mass layoffs, and much more. Such proposals routinely poll with high approval across the political spectrum. They could strip away the bogus veneer of populism from the Republican Party and create a genuine groundswell of support for Democrats from non-affluent voters. But unless control of the Democratic Party can be taken away from the corporate elites who continue to dominate it, the fascistic Republican momentum is very likely to continue. Well, that's the bleak picture right now, with 2026 shaping up as an absolutely pivotal year. And this wraps up our four-part podcast series, The Blue Road to Trump Hell. If you'd like to read my new book with the same title, you can download it all for free. Just visit online blueroad.info. The ebook is waiting for you there without charge. That's The Blue Road to Trump Hell online at blueroad.info. Thanks to Harrison Malkin for his excellent work as executive producer of this podcast. Music from R.J. Eskow. And thanks also to all of my dedicated colleagues at Roots Action. You can sign up for our email alerts at rootsaction.org.